Welcome to Vision 360, where we look at cybersecurity from every angle, from the technical foundations to executive decision-making and leadership context. I am your host, Matthew Webster, and I work with cybersecurity executive leaders to align cybersecurity with business priorities, translating technical risk into language leaders can act on. My perspective comes from decades of experience in the field, including multiple CISO roles and years working directly with leadership teams, strengthening governance, leadership, and risk alignment at the executive level. My guest today is none other than Bob Zinga, who is an executive coach focused on leadership development, self-awareness, and organizational effectiveness. His work centers on how leaders think, behave, and show up inside complex environments, making him well-positioned to examine how leadership holds up when tested in practice. In this conversation, we look at leadership where leadership meets reality. When decisions carry real consequences, leaders operate under pressure with incomplete information and constrained authority, conditions that most often expose the limits of traditional leadership frameworks. So Bob, before we get started, could you take a couple of minutes and really introduce yourself, talk about the military background, et cetera? I think this would be very helpful for others to understand where you're coming from.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, Matt, for having me here. I really do appreciate that. For those who are listening, so I'm Bob Fabien Zinga. I serve as a cybersecurity executive in Silicon Valley and information warfare commander in the United States Navy, currently in the reserve components. I've really been studying leadership since I was about 17 years old. One of the very first book I read, let me see, I have it here somewhere, the 21 Laws of Leadership. I know it's here by my primary mentor, John Maxwell. Really, I think that book literally changed my life. And he just published the 25th edition a couple of years ago. To me, and I really don't know why that was the case, but I was about 17 years old, and I kind of felt like it was in the late 90s, right? I'm like in the new millennial. There are three things everybody needs to be very, very good at. One would be leadership, the other one technology, and the other one I felt like would be business. So you have to understand business, technology, and leadership, no matter what you do. Initially, I wanted to become a medical doctor, but then I ended up becoming a tech executive. And I feel like it still sounds right to me today in 2026. And I'm so glad, since then I've spent my career really trying to become an expert in those three fields. So my career has really lived at the intersection of two worlds, right? I take military operation, and also I go from technology environment here in Silicon Valley, where leadership isn't just theory, right? It is tested in real time, often with incomplete information and real consequences. So what I am passionate about is really helping leaders bridge that gap, right? Moving from technical excellence or positional authority into true leadership. No, to me, the one word for leadership, which I usually ask on my illustrious guest, is, what is your one word for leadership? To me, it's really influence. And again, Papa John Maxwell is the one who's really pushed it to me for many, many years, but that is so true. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to have a position. You don't have to have official positioning or authority. You can influence people, and that's really what leadership is all about. So where you are really making decisions that impact people, mission, and enterprise risk. So that's really the lens I bring to today's conversation.
Love it. I think that's a fantastic background. So I'm excited to have you here and excited to hear your perspective as well. And I love the fact that you're putting business, leadership, and technology all together, because a lot of leaders don't necessarily put that together, because leadership, the fact that you've been studying Maxwell for so long, and I'm a big fan of Maxwell as well, I think that's exciting. So I think this is going to be a very fun conversation. But let's.
Yes, that is so true. Just something really quick. Because I remember when I moved to Silicon Valley about 13 years ago, in 2014 was it? That's when I was really forced to study business even more, because most of the engineers here didn't pay attention to anything security was saying at all. They completely ignored us. So the only way for me to influence engineering was to talk to them at the business level. Hey, we are a business, this is our mission. And our plan was to go public, which we did. We all made a small fortune. But for that to become a reality, we do have to take care of security. You cannot ignore this, right? And that's kind of how I was able to work with engineering and have them do what they were supposed to do, not only to code, but to code in a safe and secure way as well. Anyway,
So let's
that
go
was
ahead
pretty
and
cool.
jump into there because that's a really interesting case.
Yes.
How would tell me about that story? Tell me about how you influence things by bringing in the business perspective into leadership to have IT partner a little bit better with cybersecurity.
Yeah, so for anybody who's been in Silicon Valley, up to recently, engineers have pretty much been treated like gods or something. They are so precious, and they get paid very, very well. But I know Google and Meta have been trying to replace their engineer with AI. It didn't work very well. Looks like we're trying to hire them back. But anyway, back then, they were definitely at the very, very top of the food chain for sure. So, different from my experience in the government, especially in the military and specifically in the US Navy. Because in the Navy, right, when I am in charge of security, I say jump, no? Everybody says how high. But engineer, they completely ignore me, completely. It's like I didn't even exist. They wouldn't patch the system or do anything security would ask. So it was extremely frustrated. I think the first, I don't know, 30 to 60 days I was here in Silicon Valley, I thought about quitting almost every single day because I was like, why in the world am I on the payroll if nobody's going to listen to me? But eventually, what I understood is even though engineering didn't report to me, and I guess they didn't really have a reason to listen to me, they needed to because I was there to help them accomplish the mission of the organization in a safe and secure way. Our mission back then was to really teach the world how to code I guess use modern technology to code. So I was working for Pivotal at the time, and we really found this way to really code in the edge of cloud. That's exactly what we did. We had a lot of clients, and we were teaching them how to really change the way they were coding their software and application in a modern way. But of course, no, the way I internalized that mission for my organization was to do it in a safe and secure way. So to make a very long story short, that's when I decided to go ahead and get my business degree because senior management and the board, they really didn't understand very well all of this technical jargon. You talk about CVE and vulnerability and all of that. That was a bunch of nonsense. It didn't move the needle at all. So again, we were completely ignored. But when I started speaking in terms that they could understand, using the business work and describing cybersecurity risk the same way they understand financial risk. Almost everybody understands financial risk. Then we started making a lot of leeway. Another thing I also did back then is our primary office, the headquarters was in Palo Alto, but the engineering hub was in San Francisco. It was about maybe 45 minutes drive. So once a week, I took it upon myself. Every Thursday, I would spend the entire day with engineers in the San Francisco hub. So now they got to know me, to see me, and I significantly increased my influence. So next time I sent them an email, it wasn't just this crazy Zinga. Nobody knew from security. It was Bob Zinga. I know him. I have seen him. He cares about me. He knows about my child or my spouse or my friend or my hobby or whatever. So I really developed a relationship with them, and we were able to do a lot of things we weren't able to do the first 6 months I was there. So I really saw that in practice. That was pretty powerful.
Sure. And what I love there is you bring in a lot of emotional intelligence in it. You brought up
Hmm.
some interesting points. I got to know them. They know my kids, things like
Yes.
that. That's really an important part of that connection. And it isn't just about purely about business there. You're
Hmm.
looking at just a human behavior first from a leadership perspective, and that enabled you to do a lot more. But
Correct.
were there other types of things? You talked a little bit about, the language of business. What did that mean for you to go into that? Like there's value at risk, conditional value at risk. There's a lot of other phrases that are out there for how that works. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yes. So I feel like one thing that we don't do very well, generally speaking, most IT or cybersecurity executive is we speak our own jargon, right? When we talk to engineering or to the business or to the C-suite or the board of director. And that really doesn't translate very well because basically at that level, what they need to know, okay, this is my job, these are my goals. How in the world are you going to add value to what we are doing, right? I'm sure you've experienced that. I know when I first got into this industry, we used to be known, right, as the Department of No, NO. We said, no, can't do it. No, no, too much risk. We just can't. So basically, we were a bottleneck. We were an impediment to business. And I think that really needs to turn around. We need to turn from the Department of No, NO, to the Department of No, KNOW, right? You have to know the business, know how you make money, and then understand how cybersecurity, how that security function or IT can enable the business, how we can do it in a safe and secure way, how we can reduce risk. No, because the truth is, risk cannot be at 0%. That's not possible. If you don't want any risk at all, you're going to have to shut down the business, right? If you're going to open a business, that means you accept a certain level of risk. So you need to understand your culture and the risk appetite of the organization, which I believe is really set by the board of directors. This is how much risk we are willing to take that we are comfortable with. And then as the cybersecurity expert or the head of that function, I want to make sure that our risk is at that level or lower, right? For example, in Silicon Valley, I've worked for a lot of startup as well, and they tend to have huge risk. I mean, they want to be first to market, and they really don't care. No, high risk, high reward type of thing. But now, when you work for all the company, for example, EMC or companies like that, they don't want to take those big amount of risk anymore because they have too much to lose. They've been around for a very long time, and they really want to be judicious the decision they make. So again, depending on your organization, the and industry, each one is going to be different, but you need to understand what the culture is, what the risk appetite is for the organization, and then work within that. And of course, if you cannot do that, then I think you need to get another job, right? Because it is a very big difference when you do cybersecurity for the government. Like in the Navy, if we make the wrong decision, people might actually die, right? It's a matter of life and death. But that's not the case at Google or Microsoft or wherever. So you do have to understand that. So it's not security at any cost. It's the security control that makes sense for your organization, for your industry, and for the culture that is prevalent within your environment. So you really have to customize your security program to do just that. But what I've learned, especially in Silicon Valley, the last dozen of years is, yes, we have to move fast, but we have to move in a safe and secure way. The way I think about it is I have kind of like a guardrails. So I am not going to be an impediment to engineering. Yes, you are going to be agile. You're going to do what you need to do, move at the speed of thought. However, you're going to stand within this guardrail. Don't get out of this. And within this, you can go as fast as you can. So we really try to automate the security, baked it into the software development process so that it's not even an afterthought, right? I pretty much want to encourage my engineer to do the right thing easily. I want to make it easy to always do the right thing if that makes sense. So the way we set up our environment and the way our cybersecurity program is really baked into our processes.
Okay, that's generally speaking. But let's jump into something. You started to touch on this particular point. Where actually, for those that are listening, this is actually the first question that I had created here. But can you recall a moment where you're working with your leadership framework and things like that, and you believed it didn't hold up once you were dealing with the real consequences and the time pressure? Because there's always theory and reality. That's something that
Sure.
I think everybody has to. And I know in the military, they've got some challenges there too, just like every organization on planet Earth.
Yes.
Talk to me about that, where some of that leadership just didn't match, and what did you do about it?
Yeah. For example, one recent example in my career in the Navy, right? One of the biggest gap I have seen both in the Navy and in high tech is really between plan leadership and real-time leadership. So there's definitely a gap there. Frameworks like deliberate decision making or consensus building work and so forth. Until you are in a time compressed environment, they tend to work. But when you are in a time compressed environment and the stakes are high, they may not work as you think. So in Navy operational setting, for example, I once had minutes not hours, not days, but minutes to make a decision impacting mission continuity. So in moments like that, there is really no time for alignment meetings or perfect data. No, actually, one of my mentor, I think you may see him in the back, General Colin Powell. Okay, I think I have his book back there. But anyway,
Yes.
one thing he told us was P4570, right? Is one of his leadership principles was, as a leader, you need to make a decision when you have at least 45% of the information, up to 70% of the information you need to make a decision. Don't wait until you get 100, because if you do, it's going to be too late, right? So as a leader, you do need to make a decision when you do not have perfect data or complete data. That's why you get paid the big bucks. And then, of course, if your decision isn't the right decision, you can always monitor and then pivot and adjust. But you do need to make a decision. So anyway, the example I was referring to, there was no time for that. So what mattered wasn't the theoretical framework, but it was clarity of intent, trust in training, and decisiveness under uncertainty. Now, in the military, I'm sure you may have heard this, we kind of train the way we fight, and we fight the way we train. And I strongly believe, and based on my experience, when the moment arises, right, people do not step up to their potential. People always fall back to their training. That's why in the military we train and train and train and train over and over and over again until it becomes almost like second nature. This way, when you are in the fog of war, this is not the first time you've been in such environment. You've trained like that many, many, many times before, so you know exactly what to do, and you just focus on your mission. So that's really when I kind of learned that, yes, frameworks, they kind of guide you in peacetime, right? It's very nice to have a framework, and a lot you can learn from that. However, judgment is what really defines you in conflict.
And I would imagine as well that doctrine probably plays a role in that as well, because you're getting this underlying set of principles that, in theory, everybody's working with. How does that play into that leadership process from your perspective?
Yeah, I know and also the Navy, I think, is a very special branch of the military. And unlike the other branches, for example, when I became a commanding officer, we call that command by negation, right? So basically, I knew exactly what the mission was for my organization, but everybody as a reporting senior, but pretty much my reporting senior left me to figure out how to get the mission done, right? Especially now, if you can imagine you are a commanding officer, a captain at sea. Nobody is going to be there telling you what to do. You pretty much got there. You make up all of the decisions. But one thing you know is, okay, this is a mission of my command, my ship. This is what we need to accomplish. And then they trust you to just get the mission done. So with having so much power, it really takes, I think, a lot of courage, but humility as well, right? You do have to rely on your team, your department head, your senior team, your executive officer, senior enlisted leader, and all of those people, and trust them to do their job as well. And then together, everybody does just enough so that together you can do much more than each individual person can, right? So it's really leadership 101. But I guess in the Navy and in the U.S. military at large, it's kind of, I would say, synthesizing into our, crystallize into our doctrine. And that's why, our training is so very, very critical. From the time you go through boot camp as a seaman recruit, like I did 21 years ago as an E1, the lowest rank in the military, to now becoming a senior officer, it doesn't matter. You pretty much all have the same primary training and understanding. And I think that is so key. So you basically have to rely on each other and really develop that trust, right? Another leadership maxim I had, one of my mentors taught me that rank is rented. It doesn't matter what your position is in the organization. Eventually, you are going to retire, you're going to get fired, you're going to resign. You're not going to have that position forever. It is rented. Somebody else is going to be in your seat, that's for sure. However, trust is earned. And trust is also one of those things, right? It takes a long time to build. It's difficult to get to it, but once you get trust and you lose it, it's almost impossible to get back. So I guess to answer your question, at least my experience in the Navy, it is really based on the training we get, and many times we get what we call general military training. We do it every single year. Sometimes I am even concerned that having similar training or the same training over and over and over again, people kind of check out. They're like, I already know it. I've already
Sure.
done this, and then they don't pay attention anymore. So for my unit, I always try to find fresh ways to say the same thing that, yeah, maybe they already know, but they still need to listen. I still need to capture their attention. But anyway, so I think the training that we do, our shared mission, because no, and another one of my leadership maxim is mission first, but people always. The truth is, we do have a mission to accomplish, and there's a reason why we are members of this unit. So we are going to accomplish the mission for sure. Of course, we're going to need to take care of each other to do that, but the mission will be accomplished, because if we fail the mission, as the CEO, I have failed, and our unit has failed. So that's not going to happen. So it's our training, our mission, and then of course, building that trust. Because another thing that I've seen in the military, I don't see in the industry at large, is I have never heard of anybody in Silicon Valley being willing to die for me, ever, right? But in the Navy, the sailor to my right and to my left are willing to, no, if they need to, sacrifice their own life for me and me for them. So that really brings us, I guess it's a sacred trust. It's a club. We call them brother and sister at arm, but it is something that you just can't experience anywhere else. And I think it just takes, your mission and the trust that you developed among your team to just another level that I think most people in the industry would never be able to understand.
Yeah, and I totally get that, especially when you look at, a typical organization, the typical rate of change, the attrition rate is roughly 11%. And I'm sure
Yes.
that varies based on different specific industries and things like that. But it becomes a very tough thing, especially up at the senior leadership. Now, one
Yes.
of the things that's very common with CISOs, they have a very short lifespan. They are there, I've heard is like, I know multiple people who've been in the role for 4 months and have left,
Mm.
and that's due to a whole bunch of different things. But
Yes.
they're not in a good situation. Typically, CISOs don't last more than 2 years. I know exceptions to the rule. I know people have lasted 8, 10
Mhm.
years, and so on. But those are big challenges. You're not going to be able to get that right away in a
Yes.
new CISO role. And the other challenge too is when you're dealing with the realities. Hey, we've got to get this done. We've got this massive risk. This is negligence, all those other types of things
Hmm.
that can weigh heavily on people, and it takes time to build that trust. So
Yes.
what do you do in a situation like that? Because that's a situation where, like, look, you've got to get things done. You haven't developed trust in me, but we've got to move forward because this is going to cost our company greatly. There's always a risk that's associated with that. So how would you respond?
Yes. So to develop trust, especially when the stakes are high and you don't have much time, I see that a lot in military environment. For example, when I had, no, again, very, very privileged, really, it was the honor of my life to become a commanding officer. Because there are so very, very few people. I would say less than 1% of people. First of all, but only 4% of people who join the military end up being a senior officer of 05 and above. And of those, less than 1% get the opportunity to actually become commanding officer. So that is why, on average, for most military billets, it's like 3 to 5 years. But when you are a CEO, they give you 2 years only. And that's because they need to cycle through you as quickly as possible to give somebody else a chance. Otherwise, no, less than 99.5% would ever have the chance to become a CEO. So once you get that, you only have 2 years. And usually, you really get to understand what your unit does, the people and all that. No, it takes at least 60 to 90 days to really understand what your unit does, where you get to really trust your people and they get to trust you, and then you start developing your own plan. So having said that, the number one thing I believe is really leading by example, right? One of my chiefs said is the soundtrack doesn't match the video, right? It's like you are watching a movie and whatever they're listening to and what they're seeing doesn't match. And if that happens, they will absolutely not trust you. So as a leader, you absolutely have to be a role model. All of those policies, laws, regulation, and all of that, they apply to you first and then to your team. You are not exempt. So that is very, very important because people are always going to watch not just what you say, but what you actually do, right? That is extremely important. And then I also believe you do have to be fair. And usually in the military, we do have very high expectation and high standard. Nothing wrong with that. However, the way you apply the standard to your folks, it has to be absolutely fair. If they're male, female, regardless of their rank, whether you've known them before or no, it should be applied to everybody exactly the same way. And they need to be able to see that, yes, our boss may be tough, but he is a fair man. She is a fair woman. I think if you do those two things, it's going to take you a very long way. Like I've had a lot of commanding officers throughout my career, 21 years now. I have been in the Navy and the reserve component. There are a few commanding officers I would follow to the end of the earth because of those two things. They led by example, and then they were fair. They told us what the rules were, and if you follow the rules, you get rewarded, and if you don't, you're going to get whatever is coming to you, no matter who you are or where you come from. And then I guess one more thing I would add is the maybe the ability or the willingness to put your own career on the line for your people, right? Because when you say mission first, people always, it really means something, which means I am going to protect my people from people above me. I will be a top cover. If they mess up, I am going to accept that as my failure. I have messed up. And if they do the right thing and they do great things, then I am going to share the glory with the entire thing. So you guys have done right. I give you all the praise. You guys have done very, very bad, making me look bad. Then I take all of the blame, me and only I. And I cover my folks. When they see that, I am telling you, they are going to be willing to follow you everywhere you go because so very, very few people do that. Because some people, they become commanding officer, they get in a position of leadership because they think about me, myself, and I, and they would use their people in order to step on them and advance. But when you really truly care about them, you provide top cover, you praise them in public, and you support all of the blame in public, and you treat them fairly, and then you also care for each one individually as you are accomplishing the mission of the organization. I think if you are consistent doing that, that's going to allow you to build trust as fast as possible.
Sure. And that makes perfect sense to me. You also touched on one other point I thought was really interesting is the concept of humility. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of interesting. Like you mentioned, Colin Powell, you have to make a decision between 45% and 75% or something like that. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that. How do you maintain humility when you've just got to make a split decision sometimes and you've got to move quickly and it might be a bad one because there's like an emotional component to that. Because one of the things that happens when you enter into a leadership position, sometimes those dark triad traits start to come out in different people and they can manifest mm-hmm. themselves in different ways. I think all of us, after you've reached a certain age and been around a few companies, you've encountered some bad apples that are out there. So talk to me about that whole intersection between some of those and what you've seen and what's worked to counteract some of the issues there.
Now, I believe the number one lessons I learned as a commanding officer, again in the Navy, there is nobody above you. You are it, right? The buck stops with you. It's a very, very awesome responsibility. Actually, two quick things. When I was an instant select, I was in 2000, I think September 2007. I was still an IT free, so I was enlisted third class petty officer, information technology. Then I was selected to become an information professional officer. I was at the University of Alabama at the time. This guy came to my school. I think he was a Commander Scott Waddle. He wrote the book The Right Thing. But basically, he was the commanding officer of a sub. And he accidentally killed a bunch of Japanese fishermen. It was in the news and everywhere. Anyway, he wrote this book. Basically, as the leader, you are going to make mistakes. There is no way around that. No, to err is human. However, what Commander Scott Waddle taught me is some mistakes are easily recoverable, but then there are some mistakes that are pretty much, final, right? Fatal. you will never recover from them. Another submarine commander told me some mistakes like you driving a car and you kind of fall in a ditch. Okay, that's fine. You can get off of the ditch, continue. But then there's some other mistake where you actually hit the pole. You could die and the car is completely unrecoverable. So basically, the wisdom is, yeah, as a junior officer, you're going to make mistakes. So make as many mistakes as you need to, but learn from those mistakes and make sure to make mistakes that are not fatal. Right? So that's really the lesson in the back of my mind. Yes, I will make mistakes, but let's make sure I have things in place that are going to prevent me from making the type of mistake I will never be able to recover from. The type of mistake where you're going to be relieved of duty. Right? It's happened a few times in the Navy. So knowing that, and then I don't know if you've read this book, Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. There is only one page in this book I really, really love. I think it's the best definition of leadership I've ever heard. If I can read that to you,
Sure.
it's only one paragraph, page 412. It says, I will tell His Majesty what a king is, talking about humility. A king does not abide within his tent while his men bleed and die upon the field. A king does not dine while his men go hungry, nor sleep when they stand at watch upon the wall. A king does not command his men's loyalty through fear, nor purchase it with gold. He earns their love by the sweat of his own back and the pains he endures for their sake. That which comprises the harshest burden, a king lifts first and sets down last. A king does not require service of those he leads, but provides it to them. He serves them, not they him. That is leadership. When you lead, you are not a boss, you are a leader. People don't work for you, you work for them. Right? And I think if you are able to do that and to lead in that way, you are going to be successful and your people will have no choice but to be loyal to you. Right? Like I think there's another book that Simon Sinek wrote. I think it was Leaders Lead, Eat Last or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes. But that is the idea. It's not like I am the boss, you serve me, I get the corner office and I get the special parking, I am so special. No. You are special. I am here to serve you. For example, again, when I became commanding officer, I remembered when I was the most junior person in my unit 21 years ago. I wanted to create an environment for Seaman Zinga to be proud of doing the work he was doing. I wanted to remove any obstacle to his way and create an environment where he would go and flourish and give me 100% of his ability. Another thing General Powell taught me, right, with management, technically, you can get people to achieve their full potential. Technically, in theory, although that almost never happens. No, I think the last Harvard study, I saw most people only work about 25 or 30% of their potential. But technically, with management skills, you can get people to provide 100% of what they are able to in theory. But leadership goes beyond that. With leadership, people go 110%. How is that possible? Why do they go above and beyond? And I see that in the military over and over again, especially when you are in high-stress situation in times of war. That's the reason why people earn the Medal of Honor, because they go above and beyond. They do things that are almost humanly impossible, but they get it done. That's because they go beyond management into leadership, right? The way you care about your brother and your sister in arm and what you would do to safeguard the integrity of the mission that your team is responsible for. So I guess having said all of that, I'm trying to get back to the original question you had asked, but basically I believe that you need one, to care and truly care about your people. And if you don't, they will know. Because I've seen some leaders like that. They kind of take it. I have a checklist. I want to say the right thing, but it's not just what you say. It is what you do. It's the way you show yourself and really truly care about them as an individual and not just pushing the mission. Because I just thought my second leadership mantra, my first one was mission first, people always. My second one was one team, one fight. Because many times what happens is people try to, even in cybersecurity, right, break yourself into silos. It's us against them, even within the same organization. And I think that's not very helpful. You really have to think, okay, we are all one team. We all have one fight. Let's not be pointing fingers. here's a problem. How can we come and resolve it? Anyway, having said all of that, this is how I believe you are able to lead effectively, but also influence people so they are willing to follow you, not because of your rank, not because of your position, but because they want to.
Yeah, and they show that they care, as you pointed out. I think that's
Yes.
really an interesting one. So it's sort of interesting too, because you brought up a point that I thought was very interesting, and I've seen this in a lot of different organizations. But it's the idea of one team, one fight.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about the risk of ransomware or something like that, it depends on the organization. This could be like one set of every 3 or 4 years. It isn't something like it's definitely going to happen tomorrow. It could,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of uncertainty as to what the time is going to look like for that. But when you talk about one team, those silos really do become a problem. Like here, as you pointed out, here's the
Yes.
security team, here's this team, and how do you start to do that? Because there are a separation of duties, there's different responsibilities. If you're familiar with the concept of assurance, that's a really big one. Let's go validate that it was actually done right.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, those are all very important parts of the process.
Yes.
How do you start to bring teams together from that perspective, given this sort of corporate influence?
Yeah, well, I think you definitely need to influence the culture. For example, some of my previous jobs, I've heard some people say, that's not my job. It's not in my job description. That's not my problem. That's the wrong thing to say. Okay. Because I think you have to lead with empathy. For example, when I went back pivotal, when I first started working in Silicon Valley, where I said engineering didn't pay attention to anything, I said, I think leading with empathy is really what turned things around for my team and my organization. I feel what you feel. I understand what you are going through. You don't have enough time. You have too much to do and all of that. I completely understand. But guess what? Where we are going, we're going to need to take care of this security thing. And it's not just the job of cybersecurity. It's the job of really every employee in the organization. So leading with empathy, I think, will take you a long way. And I think that's where you really need to start leading again, whether you have a title or not, that doesn't matter. It's really the way you influence your colleagues, right? The people you work with. You want to be known as a problem solver. I am here to add value. I am here to enable sales. I am here to enable the goals of the organization. Yes, each one of us, each function have specific things to do, but sometimes you have to look at the forest and not be lost in the trees, right? So you kind of have to go back. Okay, one example, I speak quite frequently. I go to a bunch of security conferences, about 12 to 15 times a year now. I travel across the country. And usually, when I give my keynote, I usually speak to C-level executives, CISOs, and CIOs, and I ask them, okay, what is the mission of your organization? Usually, only 10% of the people in the room can tell me what the mission of their organization is. And then I ask, okay, what are your core values? They may give me a couple, or have an idea of what they mean, but they cannot give me the core values of their organization. Less than 5% can tell me that in all of the meetings I have had in the last couple of years. And I think that's a very, very important problem. Because if you have a CISO and you are supposed to provide security, but you have no idea what your organization mission is, and more importantly, what the core values of your organizations are, how in the world are you going to be able to protect your organization? Whereas people in the military, that's drilled into you from boot camp. Like you can wake any sailor that's gone to boot camp at any time in the last 50 years, tell them, hey, sailor, what are your core values? Honor, courage, commitment. Every sailor will tell you that from E1 all the way to O10. It's drilled into us. That is who we are, and that is what we stand for. So I think it really makes a very big difference. So it's not just me, myself, and I, or my function against the other function, but it's all of us working together to accomplish that goal. So really, as the person in charge of the cybersecurity function, I want to know, how can I help finance? How can I add value to HR? How can I add value to engineer? How can I help you achieve your goal and do it in a safe and secure way? Because guess what? Earlier you mentioned many times we have trouble with budget, right? And I think that's definitely true. Pretty much every jobs I've had in the industry. Now, in the Navy, I think our budget just went up to almost what $1.5 trillion. So I don't think that's going to be a problem anytime soon. But in the real world, it definitely is a great problem. There is constraint in what you can do. So you have to prioritize your task and your goal as cybersecurity function, and based on the amount of money you have, budget, people, and all of that, keep prioritizing that. But I guess what I'm saying is by using influence, by adding value to all of the other function within your organization, one magic thing that has happened to me in the past is they start sharing some of their budget with you, right? Because whatever they are doing, it may not be your budget, but it overlaps with your function for cyber security. So I guess what I am saying is by having an open mind and being just a leader, not just a cybersecurity leader, but a leader from within the
Right, right.
organization, and using your influence now at the C-level and the board, you are able to accomplish a lot more than you could with the limited resources you have, that have been
Sure.
appropriated to your organization. Because I always kind of focus on the outcome. We need to get this done. It doesn't have to be my people. It doesn't have to be my budget. It just needs to be
Sure.
done. And then working within the leadership, again, using soft skills, emotional intelligence, and influence, because they don't report to
Sure.
you, to get those outcome.
And I'm sure things are not always perfect. So,
Mhm.
like, when have you personally seen incentives or internal politics override a leader's stated values? And this happens in so many different types of organizations. It's a big
Yes.
issue, and a lot of times it's about ego. The ego is more important than the mission. So a lot
Hmm.
of people want to sweep things under the carpet. I was actually just talking to somebody from the military earlier today, and they were telling me all those KPIs are game to make us look good. And so they aren't getting into the real heart of the matter for what needs to get done. How do you
Yes.
navigate those kind of politics, or what? Maybe tell us a story about something where you've seen this type of thing and how you've managed to
Yeah.
navigate that.
I think that is a challenge, but using KPIs for KPI's sake, I think, is definitely a mistake, because at my core, I think it's always important to get better. First, to have visibility, to know exactly what is happening, and then how you can improve it. I have seen strong leaders compromise when incentive are misaligned, right? Especially in high growth environment. For example, shipping product faster versus securing it properly. That's the story of my life in Silicon Valley startup world, right? So leaders knew the right answer, but pressure from revenue goals or internal politics kind of shifted the decision. And usually when you are a CISO in a startup, and I've had a few roles like that, usually it, it appears to me they kind of hire you just as a scapegoat or something. They give you all of these responsibility, but they don't give you the authority and the budget to get things done. All right, so your hands are kind of tied, and that's kind of where I have seen where leadership gets tested, right? Where values are not real until they cost you something. That goes back again to what I was saying. Many organizations, they say, oh, these are our core values. They may have flyers in the office everywhere. This is what we stand for. But the reality, that's not how they conduct business. That's not how they hire people. That's not how they fire people. People that should be fired, even though they could be bringing in a lot of money, but they are not aligned with their core value. They are unkind. They treat their people poorly, but still they're going to get promoted just because they bring in the income against all of their core value or what they stated that they stood for. Right. So that is what I am talking about. So it is a challenge, but I think we really need to encourage and build organization where we live out our true value, even if it means we are going to be making a little bit less money for a couple of months, or we're going to treat our customer right, or, no matter what, because that is really what we stand for. So basically, what you're doing is you are thinking long term. But of course, right now, for many organizations, they don't really want to think long term. They want to think short term, because that's how their stock gets higher, and then that's how the senior leadership gets paid, right? They get paid millions based on the price of the stock. So they're thinking short term. But the thing is, when you keep thinking short term, eventually you are going to fail, even though temporarily the business is doing well. I guess what I am encouraging people to do is to actually think long term. You may not see the effect right now, but eventually you are going to do very, very well in the long term and also add a lot of value, not just to your stakeholder, but to your local community, your customer, and your employees too, right? Because I don't know about you, but especially recently in the last 5 or 7 years, I've seen so many companies here in Silicon Valley who have laid off so many people in their organization. They really didn't have to, but they wanted to, because once they do, their stock prices goes way, way up because they do not have all of this money going out for salary benefit and so forth. So to me, that's not the right thing to do. And again, if you look at most of those companies, you look at their core values. We care a lot about our employees, but that's all lies, right? It doesn't mean a thing. So talking about incentive overriding values, I think as a leader, ultimately, it is our job to make sure that those incentives are aligned with our value. For one last thing I am going to say, I interviewed this woman on my podcast. She really touched me a lot. She has a business where she helps a lot of small and medium business grow their revenue and scale, but she's not going to work with anybody whose core values are not aligned with hers and her company. That is great. So she would say no to a lot of money if they are not aligned. And then also when she hires people, she hires them based on those core values. She usually gives everybody about, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. Basically, everybody is on probation. She's going to see exactly how you work and how you are fully aligned to a core value. If you are, you stay. And if you are not, she's just going to recycle you back to the market. You just do not belong. And seeing things like that in practice, where even when it might cost her money, she insists, no, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is how we make money. I just wish more and more organizations would do that.
And that's valuable. I mean, I was reading an article from Satya Nadella, from the CEO of Microsoft, and he was saying because they laid off so many people with AI, he doesn't know if they can get the culture back or not. Because to your point, they betrayed the culture.
Yes.
You don't know if you got a job anymore. Do I stay? Do I go? What's going on? And people start to freak, and that starts to reverberate throughout the culture. And a lot of leaders, executive leaders that are making these decisions, they're in that tough situation.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And that's why I believe, that's just me, we have to prioritize people over profit. Because I think if you take care of your people, they will eventually take care of the mission and you will see the profit. But if you prioritize profit above everything else, it's just transactional, then people who stay, some of your best people may be looking for a job somewhere else too, right? It kind of affects you maybe in ways you may not realize. But anyway, her name is Terry Maxwell. It was season 5, episode 3. I talked to her. She really blew my mind. Business architect, growth catalyst, and conscious capitalist. I like the word conscious above capitalist. Yes, we are going to make a profit, but let's do it in a conscientious way.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good example. The next question I was going to get into is what separates the good leaders from the bad leaders, like what happens when they erode trust and what's different about them. But I think you just characterized a very good story. But if there another one you'd like to share, and I have nothing but respect for that lady, and I think she's building something fantastic. But
she absolutely is. In my experience, good leaders and great leaders, the difference is really the level of care they have for their people. Someone who's really going to go to bat for them. Right? When you are a great leader, you become a sponsor. You talk about your people in a room they don't have access to, right? You say, okay, this person deserves this opportunity. This person is ready to be promoted at this level, right? And that really makes a big difference. It's not just, hey, you are here, I expect you to work and you're gonna make a little money and this and that. No, it's like I care about you as an individual, as a person, and then I also hold you to account, right? So I am accountable to you and you are accountable to me as well. Because, like I said, we do have a mission, we do have a job to do. But those leaders who really truly care about their people, I think they take it to a completely other level. And that's really how you are able to create that devotion, that loyalty, where people will definitely follow you everywhere you lead because they know at your
Yeah,
core you care for them. Right.
I totally agree.
And,
One
and
of
and
the
also
other,
sometimes, okay, so one more thing I want to add is sometimes things don't go the way you expect, and sometimes you do have to let people go. But with your communication, you are frank and open, right? They know exactly
sure,
where you stand from every time. It's like, okay, I really do not want to, but my hands are tight. We have to let you go, but I'm gonna be the best reference you have ever had, or something. But where people really genuinely really feel that love. In my opinion, that's really what has made the biggest difference for
sure.
the skippers, the commanding officers, and the bosses I've had in the past. I would follow anywhere, and those I felt like just
Yeah,
average.
yeah, I hear you. Um, the other thing that's kind of going behind this as well is self-awareness.
Hmm.
Becoming self-awareness of your personality traits,
Yes.
becoming self-aware of your empathy, your humility, all of those
Hmm.
types of things are very powerful.
Yes.
And with the constraints, when you look psychologically what's happening from a constraint standpoint, a lot of times you're forced to work in those 90 hours and it's like, can I just get a little bit of relief? No, you got to get
Hmm.
moving. Keep at it, keep at it. There's a point that you turn off a little bit from an environment like that. You
Yes.
know that there's a little bit of betrayal going on deep inside of you when you're dealing with things like that. And
Hmm.
oftentimes those leaders don't have a clue. I've seen multiple CISOs leave, they get a new leader in. I was talking to somebody several months ago, was stuck in that situation. He's just like, you're pushing too hard. You're pushing too much, and it doesn't make sense given the resources we have. I respect your idea, but and they end up leaving the organization. And a
Mm.
lot of leaders come in there doing that, not really recognizing or respecting constraints. And it ends up being a huge challenge. And CISOs do
Yes.
communicate that, but there's some issues there. So how can leaders become a little bit more self-aware? How can they start to handle things? How do they handle the leader above them who is not
Yeah.
self-aware? Because usually people get hired for their technical capabilities. Oh, look, I'm a
Hmm.
wizard on the firewall. Let's make you a
Yeah.
firewall manager,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and so on. But we've got an incompatibility there because you're talking about things like trust. Like, I don't know
Yes.
if you saw, speaking of Simon Sinek, he had that whole thing about trust. How was it built? I think it was in the Navy SEALs or something like
Hmm.
that. And it's like, do I trust you versus competence? And
Yes.
that's really important. But how would you
Absolutely.
handle situations like that?
Yeah, yeah, because when it comes to it, yeah, you may be competent and be able to do your job in a technical manner, but no, would I trust you with my money or would I
Or
trust you
my
with my
wife?
wife,
Yeah.
right? So that is definitely important. Well, self-aware but constrained leader. I think, generally speaking, again, in the industry, that is going to be the case. You're going to have constrained resources. So I think it's one of the hardest realities. But I've worked with leaders who understood exactly what needed to change, but they were constrained by, legacy system, board expectation, organizational inertia, and on and on. So I think self-awareness doesn't always translate to outcome because the system wasn't designed to support change. So I think when it comes to it, when leadership becomes a question of do I adapt, do I transform the system, or do I exit? That's where sometimes you do have to make a choice, right? And but no matter your decision, while you are the head of security, IT, or whatever business function that might be, you definitely need to support your people, I believe, above all else, right? Do the best you can with the resources you have. But I also believe with soft skills, leadership skills, you might be able to increase the pie, get more resources. Like I said earlier, the cybersecurity function may have limited resources, but you might be able to borrow resources from HR, from finance. Like for example, one of the last job I had, I was the CISO of a startup in the Bay Area where I learned about artificial intelligence. We use machine learning and AI for customer support automation. For my security training program, I didn't have any funding whatsoever. I was able to get HR to fund the entire thing, right? Because HR, one thing they do onboarding and all that. Okay, why don't you guys just do security training as well? Here is a vendor. While you do the onboarding for us to give them all of the access to their Google account and all of that, we can also get them to do the security training. And okay, that makes perfect sense. So I add technically a security function completely being handled by HR, and they pay for that too, right? So that's what I'm thinking. I think sometimes you just need to think outside of the box and try focus really on the outcome, not really who is going to take credit for it and whose budget is going to come out of, as long as it is done. Again, mission first. People always know one team, one fight. Let's think about a way we can make it happen. That might be helpful at times too.
Sure. So we're getting close to time now, but I want to thank you very much. But I do want to hit you with one last question, if you don't mind.
Please. Of course.
What should leaders let go of from a traditional leadership thinking when they step into a high stakes executive role? What would be your advice?
In my experience, they should let go of the need for perfect information, because that's never going to happen. Again, from Colin Powell, the general, 45 to 70% is all you need. You have to make a decision. So you will never get perfect information. Forget about it. Number two, I think they should let go of the belief that control equals leadership. Right? Leadership is influence, not control. Right? You do not have to have it in your budget. You don't have to have the people reporting directly to you. You can influence people who work for a completely different team. Right? You could partner with engineer. You could have some of your software developer indirectly report to you because you influence them in the way they develop software in a safe and secure way. So it's not about control, it's about influence, it's about leadership. And then number three, I would say the comfort of consensus before action. Because you will not always get a consensus. Sometimes as a leader, they hire you so that you have to make the decision. The buck stop with you at time. It's good to get consensus when you can have it, but sometimes you just have to decide. So at the executive level, I think leadership becomes making high impact decisions with incomplete data and owning them fully. Another one, he was a Navy SEAL. They wrote the book Extreme Ownership, right? And knowing that no matter what happens, the buck stops with you. You absolutely own it. But you do have to make the decision, though, whether you have complete or incomplete information.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I think our leaders are going to get a lot from you. I think, your Navy experience and your background and everything that you've been reading, you've got some fantastic people behind you. I see in the bookshelf behind you. But I want to thank you for being here. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks.